Good afternoon. On behalf of Presidio, AWS, and the PGA Tour, I want to thank everybody for joining. I realize it's 4:45 on Wednesday, and I don't want to keep anybody from the craps table or any happy hour, so we're going to deviate from some of the other breakout sessions that many of you have probably gone to this week and hold more of a kind of an open-ended discussion or a panel. So if there's any questions at any point during the presentation, please raise your hand and we'll get to you guys as soon as possible. So unfortunately, I can't be inside the ropes playing on Sunday. That dream died a little while ago. But working with the tour and AWS to bring ideas to life has been pretty incredible. My name's Evan Blum. I'm the sales director for Presidio's AWS Strategic Services Group. I'm joined by Mike Page, Phil Filippelli. They actually double as my bodyguards. They're actually not allowed on stage because we didn't want to cave it in. And then Ken Level, Senior Vice President of Golf Technology for the PGA Tour. So I lead a national team of strategic account managers that work really closely with our customers to guide them through really complex business outcome-driven enterprise transformations on AWS. And I've been really fortunate over the last few months to work closely with Ken and a few other folks at the PGA Tour. And you could even go as far as saying I've been caddying for them. So Ken's idea: could machine learning be leveraged to detect crowd roar at a PGA Tour event? Now, quick show of hands. I know there's not a ton of you in here. How many have been to a tour event live in person? Okay. So much different than going to a basketball game or a football game or a baseball game. When you go to a tour event, there's a lot of things that are going on that are kind of outside your purview. So how can you detect that? How can you kind of figure out, okay, how can I bring that a little bit closer? So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the what, the how, and the why. So Ken had this idea: how could we go about building a functional prototype to take that idea and bring it to life? We effectively did that with a couple really incredible crew of engineers between the AWS Envision engineering team, Phil Filippelli's team, the folks that we have in India. It was really a team lift. People really got together and made it incredibly powerful in a really short amount of time. So the how. Through the rapid innovation process, how quickly an idea can turn from just that into something that's real, we can bring it into effectively pragmatic existence. And then not only that, but how that process is repeatable and scalable and teachable, and how impactful that can be to an organization. And then the last piece is the why. So we had met Ken in New York, and Mike kind of, Ken had spoken about the idea, and Mike said, well, candidly, why? Like, why is that important? Why is that impactful? And if you leave with nothing else today, it's not about the technology itself. It's about how the top companies in every industry are leveraging technology to drive business outcomes and better provide solutions, services, and products to their end customers. And that's enabled through a mechanism where, again, you could take an idea and someone smart like Ken's brain, and he's got a lot of ideas, and effectively bring that to life. And to me, that's so incredibly powerful if that's utilized in the right way. And we call that, how do we operationalize innovation? So that said, Ken, I'd love if you could kind of take us through what your vision is, your role at the tour, how this idea came about, and from a business outcome standpoint, like what was so intriguing about it?
Yeah, so my role, my name's Ken Level. I'm responsible for golf technology at the PGA Tour, which is perhaps the most nebulous title ever, because what does that mean? What is technology in golf? But basically my job is to collect as much data as possible about everything that's going on the golf course and pump that data stream out so that we can create products that will allow people to consume more. And if you think about that, what we're really trying to do is to create an emotional connection with something that's happening on an inanimate object in what is generally a two-dimensional screen of some kind. So the way that we do that, right now, we put sensors all over the golf course, we put telecom all over the golf course, and then we take that data, and those sensors include things like radar, lasers, cameras. We use machine learning for vision technology, things like that. Pull that together and then figure out and apply that to objects. None of that is unique. We have a lot of friends in other sports and other applications that do something similar. What makes it a little bit challenging is the operational challenge, where you normally, if you watch a sport, you have one field, and while there are good and bad broadcasts, but if you point a camera at that field, you'll generally know who won or lost the game. We have 18 fields of play at any given second. We have 156 players that are competing against each other simultaneously. It is a nonlinear sport. And on a Thursday or Friday at any given second, there are between 12 and 14 golf balls in the air, not in play, in the air at any given second. And the challenge is knowing which one of those mattered right now. Which shot was the one that I cared about? So what brought this home was I was basically ranting at the Players' Championship about a challenge that I personally have. I'm at a golf tournament. I actually manage this process, and I hear a roar from over the hill. Literally, you hear it all the time at a golf tournament. It's actually pretty cool. It can give you chills if you're not careful. But the problem was, I have no idea what happened. And we put scoreboards. We literally run scoreboards all over the golf course. Video boards, you can see all kinds of things. They don't tell me what happened. I have a device in my pocket that can tell me literally anything that's going on in the world at the time, and I still can't figure out what just happened and why people were excited enough that they yelled at the top of their lungs, or groaned, or cried, or whatever it is they chose to do. And so I started ranting about this as a problem, and we started thinking about that. And the first, it was great because the team that we were with, they immediately decided that they were going to decide to operationalize this problem. They said, look, you have microphones all over the golf course. Why don't you just turn those on? We'll figure it out. We'll tell people. It's great. And the answer to that is, unfortunately, we don't own all the microphones. They're not always on, and they're not monitored in the right way. Those are solvable problems, but I actually wanted to back into it and think about it differently. Because really what I want to know is not just when people roared, but I want to know what caused them to do it so that I can spark that reaction in others, right? So that led us down the road of going down this prototyping experience where we took a piece of data, we took a set of data and said, what are the things in this data that would cause an emotional reaction from people, right, in real time? And how would we replicate that? That seems like an easy problem, but it's much harder than it looks, and I'll give you two examples. One, a hole-in-one is obvious, right? Duh. There's a hole-in-one, big eagle putt, something like that. People get excited, they roar. That makes total sense. But there are times when a player will make a par putt and people will lose their minds because there's some context around it. And so how do I know which one of those mattered? Or a really long putt that didn't matter because the guy is completely out of contention and no one cared. So there's that side of it. And how do you take that then and put enough input into that that you can back into what is an emotional moment from just data? That's really hard, and it's a harder problem than it seems. The second point, though, is I don't want to just do that on the golf course. It's interesting to put it on a scoreboard. It's interesting to ping my phone. It's interesting, and I want to make it to the point that the Tour app sound that it alerts you is a crowd roar, because I think that's pretty emotionally convincing anyway. But if I do that, I don't want to just do it there. What I really want to do is I want to take that, one, at places where there is no crowd. We don't always have a huge group of people that are on six on the far end of the golf course. We're talking about 200 acres, right? So sometimes there's not a crowd to roar, but it's still a roar-worthy moment. How do we find that and then transmit that so people do get excited? That's thing one. And thing two, forget just on the golf course. I want to be able to hear and feel that roar and get that emotion no matter where I am at any given minute. I've often said that my goal is to make sure that we are the single biggest detriment to productivity on Thursday and Friday in the world, right? I don't want people to be working. I want them to be desperately wanting to know what happened. And if they hear that, if it's about a player they care about because we've figured out who that is, and it was a moment where they did something interesting because we figured out what that was, I can keep drawing them in and getting them more and more interested in what happened. So all of that was the emotional problem, and really what it drives to is engagement. I want people to be emotionally connected to the sport in a way that they're paying more attention to what we do. So it's not just about solving the problem, it's about how we get there and why, and what we're trying to accomplish when we do. And what these guys did with us is we sat down and just basically tried to see if we could figure out how to make that happen. So that was a very long way to answer.
That was perfect. And I think it's worth noting, obviously being at reInvent, that leveraging AWS's working backwards framework, we were able to come up with a functional prototype in 2 weeks. Now, was it the cleanest, most elegant prototype? No, but the idea that you could take this idea that Ken had that really is going to solve a gap and bring it to life in a short amount of time, again, I stress the fact how impactful that is to an organization that's trying to innovate. I mean, we talk about the difference between.
Can I jump in there for a second?
Please.
What do you mean it wasn't a good prototype? I take issue with that. So I was the solutions architect that worked with the team, and I don't, you constantly attack. It was 2 weeks. It was awesome. But that said, I probably have one of the best jobs in the company because I get to do the R&D stuff. And the things that we do, are usually very innovative, and we're using technologies and partnering with AWS, the engineering team, that sometimes they don't even have services and things to use, and so we get to really try a lot of stuff. In this case, Mike actually was the one that pulled me into it, and he said PGA, and I didn't even listen to what we were building. I was like, yeah, absolutely, and I jumped on it. And that said, it was 2 weeks, but it was one of those things where we did a lot of different experimentation, and that's really what it's all about, and it's that fail fast, but you got to keep trying stuff, and you got to try multiple things at a time, because the team's in India, the event is in the US, so any computer equipment that we're using to make this happen, it's got to be in 2 places. And that also was another piece that we had to learn a lot of stuff, and then we did another event right after that, and we had to really write the whole UI, rewrite the whole experience, because when I was at the event and we were sending all the data to the cloud, we thought that would just work. It'd only take a couple seconds. But now you're in an event, people are drinking, people want to putt, people kind of are competitive, and it wasn't fast enough. And so those are some of the challenges that we had to go through. But I will never allow you to say, 1, I'm fat, which you did, and I'm not going to forget that one, and 2, that it wasn't a good prototype and it wasn't pretty.
I don't know how to respond to that, but I think it's.
I'll defend you on that one.
Sure.
I think, well, the prototype was great, but I think the point here, and I love your take on this, you remember, okay, when I first met him, we get to work with a lot of folks in different companies that are in charge of, product development, coming up with new revenue streams, new products, services, new markets to get into. He's a genius. I mean, he's coming up with these ideas just one after another after another. But the big key is to figure out, of all of those, which will actually work. I once read, it was an interview with Johnny Cash a long time ago, and they said to him, how did you write so many great songs? And he said, well, I wrote for the trash can. And his point was, I didn't sit around trying to think of Folsom Prison Blues. I just started writing. And most of this, with the intent that I'm going to throw all of this away, but out of that, came Folsom Prison Blues and all of these great songs that he came up with. So I think the challenge, I don't know if this audience is mostly technical or on the product side, but I think if you're on the technical side, the challenge you have is, how do you keep up with the ideas that he comes up with, but more importantly, how do you give him a mechanism through which you can figure out, A, which of those ideas will actually work, and then based on that, which of them make the most sense for us to build, and then how can we do that quickly? At the end of the day, it's all about how quickly can you take an idea from someone's brain and turn it into something that makes your company money. So if you'd be willing just to speak on, remember one of the things I asked you when we first met is, why does this matter? And I mean it from the perspective of, what does this do for the tour if you can take, that's a thing. If you can use it to generate more revenue, that's a result. And I'd love.
Yeah, so first off, I'd like to point out that you just said that I'm going to do a lot of things that need to go in the trash, and I appreciate that perspective, because I'm going to generate a lot of ideas that are apparently not worth anything. I'm kidding, man. But no, so the example that I would give on that is, this has a whole host of things that we can do with it. So first off, if we can find a roar-worthy moment, if we can find something that causes that emotional reaction, I'll again just give two examples from the opposite ends of the spectrum. One of them is, if you have if you play golf and have a child, sometimes your child often wants to play golf with you, but they don't really care about the tour. They just want to spend the time, which is great. But if they become a fan of something, they're going to become a fan if there's something that player does. So if they decide that Brooks Koepka is the thing, or whoever, pick your poison, Colin Morikawa, right, who is, by the way, a very good golfer. If you haven't heard of him, he's 23 years old and made $23 million in the last 3 years, and won everything this year. So pay attention to that guy. I think he's going to really be something. But if you decide he is your player, and I can give you a way that your child can, every time he does something interesting, it will let them know, and it's not just about watching a 6-hour golf broadcast. It's about putting something in front of them. You will create that emotional connection that will last a lifetime. That has real value to me. That has real value that go a long way. But even take it to the other extreme. We, at the same time, we're distributing data to hundreds of clients. So ESPN is the one that is most obvious. It is, the worldwide leader. So that's one we usually start with. What if I could take that? Right now, we're distributing data that has all kinds of levels and SLAs around it. So how fast, how much, where do you want it to go, all those kinds of things. I could actually just create a product out of this that will immediately allow me to customize the data that I deliver so that I can say, here are events that your fans will care about because we've customized them to what they need. And allows us to then create a new product that we can then sell to them because they can monetize that on their own. There are just a host of ways that we could use that to understand and give people more of, frankly, just what they want. I'll give you another example. In a broadcast truck, one of the biggest challenges in a golf broadcast truck is figuring out how to tell a story when there are 12 balls in the air and 72 of them in play at any given day, right? Which shot mattered? Which was the next one? If we have this predictive way of saying this is a roar-worthy event, imagine what happens when we can start saying this might become a roar-worthy event. The predictive level of this becomes interesting. Well, now I can start putting a rundown of shots on the screen so that a producer can say, okay, well, I know I'm following the leaders and I know I need to pay attention to them, but they're going to this hole and they're probably just going to par it. But this guy's at a place where historically he is very likely to gain 2 strokes on this hole because he will chip out. If you know that and you know the likely places where that's going to happen, you immediately give yourself another set of tools to tell a story. And that increases people wanting to watch the broadcast. All of those things are how and why we, like this doesn't just have legs because it's an interesting problem. It's what you do with it that makes it so that you can do more with it and get people engaged in what we're trying to do.
So let's take a look at what we actually built. And Phil, we can talk through that and how we iterated and how we leveraged our rapid innovation framework. So again, we had the idea, or Ken had the idea, and it distilled into, okay, so if you came up to a putting green, Ken, Phil, Mike, anybody in the audience, and we started with 3 balls, and like if anybody's obviously played golf here, you go to address the putt. It teed up where you could, take your shot. It told you when to come up. When we demoed this at the Northern Trust and down in Atlanta at the Tour Championship. From there, as the ball is going, it's analyzing the potential for crowd roar. So you have a 12-foot birdie putt, and you're putting, and it's analyzing that. And then from there, it kind of splits, and there's 2 end states possible. There's when Tiger Woods makes a long birdie putt, and everybody goes crazy, and then when a putt lips out and you hear the proverbial sigh, and again, how I speak partially as a fan, but how cool that could possibly be when you're watching a broadcast or when you're at an event and can figure out, okay, that's where that's coming from in a really short amount of time. Again, I'm going to stress this. It's truly the process behind this is repeatable. Phil, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the rapid innovation process and what we've done and what your team did and how we work closely with Envision Engineering and all the variables that came into play that really, I think, made it special and unique.
Yeah, thank you. So a lot of what we're doing is design thinking and working backwards, which I wish I did this at the beginning of my career. I've been in the industry for about 30 years, and since I started working with the working backwards, meaning let's figure out the end state and let's go after that and come up with all the things that we have to that might be a barrier, but you're starting at that point. And now we get Ken, he gets great ideas, but a lot of times in many companies, what's the idea? And so the whole process is helping understanding what those ideas are, getting the feedback, let's say from your customers, and then now going forward and actually saying, what do we build? And this is where, the PR FAQ you hear a lot of, it's a press release. And it's a series of questions that basically start telling us and framing up what we're trying to do. And in fact, technology doesn't matter. What really matters is that business, that end state that you heard Mike talk about. On the other side, when you look at the problem of putting, you break down the problem and now you start saying, okay, well, how do I do that? What technologies do I need? Well, you need to also find out, could you actually have a technology that could solve that problem. We tried all kinds of different things. We ended up, for the most part, it's an AI/ML, object detection, SageMaker type of a solution. But we didn't start there. That was one of the options. But then we also use a variety of sensors, IoT type devices as well. And through it all, as the team was working through it, the other thing was hilarious when I first realized it. We did our first sprint demo, and the team that was working on it is my colleagues in India, and they actually never played golf. And I never even considered that that was an option. And so basically, the first sprint demo, and Ken, I don't know if you remember this was hilarious. The team did a putting example, because we kind of got it almost to work, and they used the club with a P on it. It just wasn't a putter. It was a pitching wedge, because they thought, guess what? And so in my experience in doing any types of these projects, you got to make sure everybody understands the mission. And on the other side, you're going to do a lot of stuff that, yeah, it may end up getting thrown out, but you're learning, the team's learning, and you're evolving. And so those ideas keep coming together, but you can't give up. And there were times when, yeah, you're working late, you're frustrated, but in the end, you got to create a culture that you succeed. You will get there. And this is one of those things where, the process here of the prototyping and the MLP, everybody should understand what MLP means. It's not MVP. It's the most lovable product. It's the thing that someone wants, not the minimum necessity. Because when the minimum necessity is built, those projects usually never do anything else, and now you're left with some substandard solution that you're stuck with, and now you got to maintain forever. You can't set the bar there. And then, once you get to that point, you keep building it up. And so again, to me, a lot of the process is breaking down the problem into solvable components, and then with that, now coming up with solutions that offset that and do a lot of experimentation. And that's the stuff that our process does, but we do it in a time box, because you can't just do it forever. You got to put parameters around it. And some of the stuff won't work, but it's still one of those things where even when it doesn't work, there's actually a lot of learnings and a lot of value that comes in that.
Take you guys through. Again, this is when you have an idea and being able to operate through this framework, it really kind of guides you and stay on track with operating this way. So to kind of summarize, so operationalizing innovation the way we look at it is being able to create your own mechanisms that turn ideas into solutions. So again, not to belabor it, but when you could take an idea and see it through and turn it into a potential solution and open up a new revenue stream for an organization like the PGA Tour, or capture more fan engagement, that's a real metric that's important. And Ken talks about being the most disruptive organization on a Thursday and Friday. I probably tend to agree with that, and I'm probably one of those people. Sam, you didn't hear that, by the way. But this is, again, Phil and his team came up with this slide, and I'm not big on PowerPoints, but this really takes you through the whole life cycle of again, working backwards, and not you're starting at the end and bringing it back, and really how powerful that can be. So I appreciate everybody taking some time this afternoon. Is there anybody have any specific questions for myself, our team, Ken, unrelated to this? Please.
I'm sorry, say that again? Do the commentators have to do more work? Is that what you said? No. So actually what happens is that this simplifies their life. It helps them to know where to look and what to look for. We actually take this and we build additional tools so that it helps them. We're giving them more things of interest to talk about. One of the challenges of a golf broadcast is that it's really, really long. And the ability to know what's next, what's going to happen next, and something interesting to talk about in that, it's very welcome. So it gives them essentially another set of notes. It also helps us to know what kind of graphic we should probably be thinking about building. If we know what's going to happen, this is a tool that will help us to do some of those kinds of things. And the more you can prefab that, the better off you are.
Anyone else?
A couple months ago, I noticed for the So-So Championship that was in
Oh, no, there's no issue. It's because we weren't collecting live data. So the problem we have is that our system right now, I'll do just a very brief rundown on what it takes to collect that data. I talked about it really briefly a second ago. We actually, it takes 5 trucks and 10 days to set up a PGA Tour event. We drop 20 plus miles of fiber. It's a specialized, unique fiber. It's got 4 strands of fiber and 2 of copper. We have a special power solution. We drop 50 to 60 demarcs on the golf course, plus a private Wi-Fi and a private LTE network just to collect the data. Plus after that, we start setting up radar, camera, lasers, fairway tablets, greenside tablets, all that kind of stuff. That's really difficult to ship overseas. So one of the big things that we're working on and that this feeds is how do we collect all that data, but put it in a smaller box and one that we can get around much, much faster. That's frankly on my list of objectives for the next 2 years. So if anybody's got a really easy idea on how to do that, I really appreciate it. We've got a couple. But the problem we've identified is we can't move that fast and that far to get things where we want them to go. So really it's just, and you'll notice you saw the same thing at Mayakoba the week after that, and then also in Puerto Rico, same problem. So domestic US, we can give you all the data in the whole world, and even in certain areas, Mexico, Canada. We go beyond that, and it gets really difficult. We're working very hard on a solution that goes in and we can take globally.
I also noticed that some of the smaller events, because you mentioned that you guys have radars.
Yep.
I noticed for some of the events that the 3D tracking was only available for some of the players and not the others. And I'm not admitting that I placed 100 to 1 bet on some of these players that.
So he asked, he can't get 3D tracking on all the players for every tournament. It's exactly the same problem. Again, my job is to try and get as much data as we can off the golf course so that we can feed your habit. We absolutely want to make sure that we can take care of you. The challenge that we have is we literally can't do it every single week, and I don't like it, but I appreciate the sentiment. The weeks we don't have, it's called TourCast. I assume that's the interface. Yeah, TourCast is a 3D interface. It's a video game like where you can manipulate the entire golf course. Just a little bit of background for those that don't know. We map the golf course down to the inch using point cloud and photogrammetry, and then we put that into these models that you can use and literally set yourself behind trees and leaves and all kinds of things and see things from a player perspective. When we do have radar data, we actually even put all the data behind every shot, plus shot shapes and everything else like that in with it. We don't have that every week. Interestingly, just as a total aside from this, one of the other things that we're developing and trying is we developed something that we call, it's ShotLink Lite, where we literally put it in a suitcase. And we've developed a new sensor. We tested it this week at a Pro-Am event that was here in Vegas around reInvent. And we learned a whole lot. We're trying to get that so where it's operational and we can get it at more and more events. So it really is a problem of scale. The way that ShotLink is built, it's now 20 years old and has evolved over time. It is a very big box to move around. And what we're working on right now is to really shrink that so we can put it everywhere it can possibly go.
Anyone else? Craps table calling, I guess? I want to thank each and every one of you for attending. I hope this was, I hope you took something away from this, and I really appreciate Ken, you joining us, and everybody that put effort behind the scenes. It's really been pretty incredible to see this come to life. So,
thanks.